Today had been like any other day in Konoha. The skies were bright, wary a single cloud in sight. The town was bustling with people, big and small, fast and slow, old and young. But it would have been any other day if Tsunade hadn't been so damn irritated. First, to start of the day, she had accidentally tripped out of her bed, because she had gotten tangled up so bad in her sheets. Then she found out that the water system was down a bit ago but had just fixed it quickly, but there had been no hot water. So freezing cold she dried herself off. In her office she sat down, and noticed that the inbox was precariously close to toppling all of those papers down, that she had to approve, and look over. What ticked her off the most, was an D-class mission she was supposed to assign. Normally she would have stamped it quickly, after she had looked for a genin team that was best suited for that job. While scanning over the paper, she looked at it closely because for a D-class paper, it had a very nice signature at the bottom, and a stamp of certification. Looking closer it seemed to smell very nice, so intoxicating in fact that she started to fall asleep on top of her desk. Only when she smacked her nose on the paper that she knew it was very potent. It was a simple protect mission, for cargo hold for the minor villages scattered around the Leaf Country. Scanning over the cargo hold, she spotted something that intrigued her. All of the other cargo seemed fine, shurikens, kunais, armor, cotton, the like. But the one thing that made her double take, was that it had a vial of a very potent aphrodisiac. She then searched the sub-papers below the main page. Looking through she found what she had been frantically looking for. The aphrodisiac, after reading the contents it was, almost shocking. She sat down with a very tired brow. This item was at least going to bump the class up to an A-class mission. Because the aphrodisiac had drastic effects if the opposite of whoever smelt it had. Letter. Sensual Viper Aphrodisiac. Grade S strength. 50 megaliters. Effects. Causes the opposite to become so irresistible attracted to the wearer, that it causes them to think they are in love with the wearer. Acts of lust have occurred during the duration of the effect. Use only in conditions when you wish to engage in intercourse with a specific person in a closed environment. All people or the opposite within 500 yards of you will suddenly rush towards your location, so make sure you are far away besides the person you wish the effect to take. Apply 5 megaliters to your skin and rub until it's all gone, and then drink 5 megaliters of the substance for it to take effect. Specific effect. From the Tang-Ru Company. This is a S-strength aphrodisiac, meaning that this will be the most potent aphrodisiac in the market to date. The ones at this level causes the opposite of the wearer to basically charge the wearer and then engage in intercourse. From past experiences some people have died from being mauled so badly from the act. Side effects. The aphrodisiac will also cause the person that loves the wearer the most to go temporarily insane, due to the high level of attraction to begin with. So it will usually make them buckle beneath their own weight. During this time their insanity try to get them as far away from the wearer as possible or else they will engage in the fray, if they are not the target of the wearer. End letter. If this got in the hands of anybody it would cause some serious damage. It would almost be as bad as Rock Lee downing 3 bottles of vodka. She mentally shuddered of the thought, from what Guy Maida told her, if he could level down a building with a cup of sake, then she did not want to know what would happen if he took that much. She couldn't send a team of genin with more than one girl on this mission. It would be suicide because the men would chase them down until the effects worse off. And she knew that men could be tempted very easily, especially by lust. But this was an A-class mission, so she needed to send a team of Chunin or a Junin. Looking over her list of available people, she realized that all the Junin had been sent off on other various S-class missions. Even Kakashi was gone because of complications. She snorted, probably he was trying to find Jiraiya asking when the next release of his perverted, Come Paradise, would be out. But she needed experience. Looking over again, she found a lot of Chunin she could choose from, but the ones with most experience were teaching currently. Iruka was out on a trip with his class so she could call him. That left Sakura. She had come back with Naruto after their escapade of saving Gaara. They had succeeded but had come back with many wounds. Sakura had drained most of chakra healing her own wounds, and stopping the poison from taking too much effect after fighting the puppet boy. Naruto was also in pretty bad shape, but due to his bloodline limit, he had healed fairly quickly, considering he had 10 or so gashes in various parts of his body almost 6 inches long and an inch wide. Then she thought since Naruto was here, She could pick him, even though he was a genin that was due to technical difficulties. He had more experiences than probably half the Chunin, 1 or 2 Junin, and had the same as the Anbu force. He was a force to be reckoned with. With Sakura there, she was sure that nothing would go wrong, as he had beaten Gaara, and nearly taken down Zabuza in his true genin days. Then it was settled. Sakura with Naruto helping her would be the ones to guide the cargo shipment into the next town. And that would be that, and she would be scot-free of this infernal A-class mission. Quickly signing the team, and rubber stamping her approval, she then looked over to the inbox. Gagging at the towering papers, she didn't know that it had taken her long to make a decision. Hastily she put the document into the outbox, then hastily started on her never-ending paperwork. Sighing, she looked out of her window. It was such a nice day, she thought. She should be outside. There was a new casino opening in town, and she was itching to try it. With renewed enthusiasm and the promise of gambling, she surged through her inbox, marking, assigning, and stamping. The thought of the A-class mission in the back of her mind. Sakura and Naruto. I've been assigned an A-class mission. A girl with pink hair, in leather boots, exclaimed. The orange-clad boy next to her managed a smile, before returning to his ramen bowl, attacking the noodles with his chopsticks. Looking over her mission statement again, she looked at it closely. Doesn't seem too hard, only a routine protection for a pretty wealthy merchant. Cheekily she tapped her friend's blonde head. Slow down, you're going to choke, and I'm not doing the Heimlich maneuver in you, she told him, with a bit of a smirk on her face. Slowly down a bit. He bit off his strand of ramen and then wiped his mouth with the sleeve of his shirt. Then her emerald green eyes started intently into his ocean blue eyes for a bit, but it wavered and she was back in reality, after zoning out. Anyways, you're supposed to help me on this mission for some reason, Sakura said, a bit offended. She was very capable of handling herself, ever since her training with Tsunade. She didn't need her clown here with her. Catching her own breath, she then reworded what she just said in her head. She didn't really think that Naruto was her clown, but disregarded it as Naruto's bad influence. Really? He asked, surprised, his own blue eyes looking up from the ramen stand, his favorite place, Ichiraku Ramen. Most of his memories of eating anything was basically here. He even had his own spot for him, and sometimes his friends when they came along. So what do we do now? Well, the mission doesn't start until tomorrow. So let's stock up on a few things because it seems this is going to be at least 12 hours time, she lectured to her blonde friend, who seemed to attack his ramen once again. Clenching her fist, she let out a frenzied scream as her fist came in contact with the side of his head. Flying out of seat, he hit the floor, hard. Getting up again with a large bruise on the side of his head. What was that for Sakura-chan? He yelled with abandon. You weren't listening to me. She had a matter-of-factly look on her face. Yes, I was. I heard you. I was still hungry though, he replied, without looking at her face. Okay then, what did I say? She asked with her tone rising. Mission, tomorrow, stock up? 12 hours, he said between mutters and incoherent words. Okay, so you were listening, her voice softening a bit, regretting that she had just punched her friend for no reason. Glancing over, he saw what effect he had on her, and instantly returned to his happy-go-lucky face. Making sure he had a noodle on his cheek somewhere, he looked over to Sakura and simply said, It's okay, Sakura-chan, as she looked up to meet his eyes, then looked over to the strand of noodle on his cheek. Her mouth, slightly starting to define into a smile. What do I have something on my face? Naruto asked, acting oblivious. Naruto, you know you did that on purpose, she gasped now as she started to chuckle a bit. Do what? He pushed it even further, causing her to start tearing from her small bouts of laughter. Okay, stop now before I stop breathing. Tears of laughter falling freely down her eyes. Good, I thought you were gone for good this time, saying it with a bit of a happy tone in it, as he stuck out his tongue, and her returning her own tongue. It may have sounded cliché, even silly. But whenever she was happy, he was happy, and he did all he could to give her that happiness she deserved. Leaving his money and tip down, he and Sakura got up and started walking down the street to the nearest stand that sold shurikens as he was running low. She could only guess why this mission was an A-class mission. It should be a D or C class, nothing too serious. Shrugging off her doubts, she saw that Naruto had already walked far ahead of her, and raced to catch up. Both of them oblivious to the chaos that ensured the next morning. Waking groggily from his bed, He slowly stepped out of his bed, and rubbing his eyes he went into the bathroom. Grabbing his toothbrush and toothpaste, smearing a good-sized chunk of blue and white, he started scrubbing the insides of his mouth. The mint freshness being etched into his mouth. Sighing, he splashed water onto his face, and rubbed it off with a towel. Exiting his bathroom, he grabbed a cup of ramen and filled it with hot water. Closing the lid and waiting for the noodles to soften, he opened his refrigerator. Thanks to his trip with Giara, he had gotten lucky and scored quite a bit of cash, and he carefully hid it until he came back. He made a sizable chunk of money, and could now afford a few things to branch out, even thought ramen was always his favorite. Thinking back a bit, he remembered his two biggest lucky wins. The first was his 3 sevens at the slots, earning him around 10,000, and the second was a royal flush, heart. He had bet all his money in his frog in it because the many next to him was making him pissed. He bet his 1,000 from previous winnings, and made a nice fat chunk of money. 95,000 to be precise. But he needn't spend so much. Taking out 2 eggs, some bacon slabs, and a gallon of orange juice. He had money to experiment with cooking. It was always something that intrigued him, and he did it as much as possible. But eating it was just as good. Grabbing a bit of butter, he slathered a generous amount of it onto a skillet Aruka gave him. He placed a few pieces of bacon within the pan, making it sizzle everywhere. Then, removing the long piece of pig meat and fat, he placed it onto a dish he had. Then, taking the eggs, he broken them on the side of the pan and placed them within the pan. The oil and butter making it ever more scrumptious. After a few minutes, the clear white yolk of the egg became a solid white. Risking his eggs, he made a quick flip in the air, and then the pan was replaced with the plate with bacon. Landing dead on, sunny side down. He whooped loudly. It was the first time he nailed a flip. He usually missed and ending up losing his eggs. Pouring a glass of orange juice, he headed back to the table and gorged on his breakfast. Then, without even pausing, he took his chopsticks and then continued to swallow his load of ramen. Quickly downing his juice, he hurried back into his room to change. That's right, I have a mission today, he thought. His childish thoughts of just scoring with Sakura were long gone. But thoughts of just spending time with her and being her friend was enough. Quickly putting on his infamous orange suit and his forehead protector with his leaf signet, he ran out of the door and off the balcony. Scaring some people as they backed off from him. It was a 6-story building after all, and he was on the 5th story. Looking around, he spied what he had been looking for, a camping gear store. Entering, he looked around for a few things he would need before taking off with Sakura. He had already gotten his shuriken sets. Looking around, he found new things that had been produced since his absence. Dehydrated ice cream. He was surprised. He didn't know ice cream could be dehydrated. The store's owner was giving him some cold stares. He didn't really care, but he didn't want to be a nuisance right now. He grabbed a new belt, with more room for his shuriken. He also had multiple pockets for other things too. Money, food rations, the like. Grabbing his wallet, he pulled out bills that totaled up to $25, and placing it on the countertop. Wrapping the new belt around his waist, he thought it looked pretty stylish. Plus it was black, so it accented his outfit nicely. Walking out, he put his hands behind his head. Spying someone's watch, he checked the time. He was going to meet Sakura-chan in 5 minutes at the front gate. Not good. He found out that Sakura had inherited the old hag's lack of patience for people who were tardy. Meaning if he was a nanosecond late, Sakura would punish him. Usually it was a swift punch to his head. But there was one thing he dreaded more than the punch, and it was the time he was later than Kakashi-sensei. She had pounded him flat into a pancake. It was not the best feeling in the world. Converting some of his stamina into chakra, he streamed them into his legs, then pushed off, sprinting from the roof of buildings, leaping from the top of one to another. Rushing as fast as he could, he knew he was barely going to make it. Using what little chakra he had converted, he did a super leap and smashed into the ground. A huge crater where he had released so much chakra. Finally, you're here, Sakura said in an annoyed tone. Sorry Sakura-chan, he apologized profusely. What's done is done. Come on, they're waiting for us outside, she replied, accepting his apology with a curt nod. Both of them treading outside, come to a wagon with 2 horses and a driver. It certainly didn't look very special, but then again appearances could be deceiving, he knew that too well from personal experience. Both of them flanking the sides, Sakura headed up farther, while Naruto faded back a bit so that they covered as much of the wagon as they could. Walking for nearly 3 hours, they began to grow weary. The driver himself was getting a bit tired from wiping the horses every once in a while. Settling down, she laid down a blanket and pulled some provisions from her pack. He just pulled a bag of trail mix out of his belt, while the driver headed into a wagon and ate some leftovers from his breakfast that morning. The horses were grazing. Sitting down next to Sakura, he laid back onto the tree's trunk. Smiling slightly, as he relaxed, all his muscles became less tense. All of a sudden all his senses became alert, the hair on his neck rising a bit. Sakura too sensed that something was wrong. Both of them had laid down their meal and so they slowly scanned their surroundings, for signs of any disturbance. Staring intently on a bush he had just saw rustle, he inched his hand into his shuriken holster. Then less than a second passed, as he had let out 3 shurikens and rushed up. He had caught this one to the shoulder. Letting out a groan, the man rolled over. The opening was used to Naruto's advantage, as he quickly hit the muscle point where the neck and shoulder meet and sent the man into slumber land. Sakura had leapt up and smacked his accomplice out of the tree, knocking him down and stringing kicks and punches into the man's chest. The pain coursing through the man's body instantly made him unconscious. Then a huge explosion was heard at the wagon. Both of them turned to see a very formidable woman there, a huge sword at her side, and outfit on her body barely clinging on. The driver dead, both horses were on the ground in their own pool of blood. The woman, however, still continued to ignore everybody as her eyes inspected the cargo. Then her hands flashed in and pulled out a small box. "No you don't," Sakura heard Naruto cry, as he did a sliding tackle sending the woman up. Her sword used as a momentum balancer, she spun vertically up once, and her sword went down piercing the ground. Naruto used the time to quickly grab the package. Its content fell out, and he turned under it and caught it. A vial of purplish substance was in his hand. The woman, regaining composure, instantly warned Naruto. "Don't break that thing, boy. It's worth more than your life," she threatened menacingly. "You're not the position to be calling the shots," was his arrogant reply. "This is why this is an A-class mission. Doesn't look that special to me," examining the vial. "Give it to me, boy," she yelled, ignoring his pervious remark. "Nah, I think I'll keep it," he said with a bit of a smirk. In a berserk frenzy she charged, sending her sword to Naruto's neck, nearly beheading him. Bending back to avoid her attack, she caught him off guard as her other hand came into a very strong jab. Using the hand with the vial within it to block it, it smashed into his clenched fist, as the whole vial broke and smeared his clothes, face, and hands. "Oh nasty. What is this?" he questioned out loud. The woman stopped in her tracks, staring on Naruto intently. She dropped her sword and leapt in to hug him. "Gah, what the hell, crazy lady," he said, confused. He sent a swift blow to her head and knocked her out, then ran towards Sakura, who was on the ground clenching her head. What happened? He was tired of asking so many questions now. Sakura was on the ground now, her hands around her head squeezing. Kneeling down next to her, he was about to ask her what was wrong. But her lips met his in a hungry kiss. Knocking him back, his mind was totally eradicated. All rational thinking was gone, just this feeling was entrapping him. Sakura, running out of air, released up and then again came back down to meet his lips again. This time Naruto was prepared, and grabbed her shoulders, pinning her onto the nearest tree. She struggled, and it was a very strong struggle. He was putting a lot of chakra into his hands, keeping her pinned. Her head came out again to meet his lips once again in a kiss. Quickly thinking, he needed to get her down, but didn't want to hurt her too bad. "I want you," she let out between her breaths for struggle. He started at her. This wasn't Sakura at all. Looking intently into her eye, he saw nothing but lust. "I have to do something," thinking desperately of a way to make her sleep without harming her, it came to him. Head-butting her, he slung her between his 2 arms. Cradling her unconscious body against him, he rushed back to Konoha village. The 3 hours of walking turned into 15 minutes of chakra-induced sprinting. There was something wrong with Sakura, and he needed to get to Tsunade to fix it. He was about 150 meters from the village, when he stopped abruptly. Every single female he saw was rushing towards him. "What the hell is happening?" he questioned again for the umpteenth time since the wagon incident. This was not good. There were shinobus up top in the trees, village girls in the bottom. Girl upon girl came down onto Naruto, as he dodged left and right. The ones that did manage to grab him he shook off. There were a few lucky ones that managed a kiss onto his cheek, forehead, even one got half of his lip. One girl got his leg completely and he fell onto the ground. The girls instantly swarmed him. Gasping for breath, he made a mad rush into the city. It only attracted more girls now, as he saw even more of them charge at him. In the city he gathered a lot of chakra into his feet, and leapt up again very high this time. Outside of his apartment he jumped in, closing the door hurriedly. He needed a plan, he was extremely desperate. At this rate he would be screwed if he didn't do something. The town was acting weird, just like Sakura. He needed to keep her like this until he found out what was wrong. Laying behind his door, he silently let out his breath. But it was short-lasting as hundreds of kunais with love letters attached to them were pierced into his door. One narrowly missed his head, his door busted open and his windows shattered. As more girls young and old entered, grabbing Sakura again he rushed into his room, but not before his left sleeve got torn, and his shoe was lost amidst the crowd. Into his room he flew, he didn't care now, he needed out. Using the back of his body he blew a hole straight through, and onto the neighboring apartment. Suddenly the roof beneath him burst open, revealing two pairs of hands desperately trying to grab his ankles. Running he spied a blonde-haired girl, Ino. He sighed in relief. She could help, she knew Sakura well, maybe she knew what was wrong. He thought she was trying to meet him, but she just tackled him into a passionate kiss. Gah, not again, he mentally cursed everything. Scissor kicking Ino's legs, she fell back smacking her head onto the ground. Muttering a quick sorry, he shot off again before more damage could be done. He had just received his first and second kiss from Sakura, but now something weird was going on. He knew that he couldn't become a chick magnet this fast. Spotting the monument he knew he would be safe there. Running up he finally let out his breath. Then 20 grapple hooks came straight up and connected all around him. As girl upon girl came up rushing to him. Two of them pinned his legs down as they kept meeting him in passionate kisses. He was bound down by girls now. Struggling, he was gonna need a lot of power to get out of here. Then he heard his zipper unzip. "You have got to be shitting me." He cursed out loud. What a predicament. He had just narrowly escaped a horde of lustful women all wanting to do unthinkable things with him. Now he was on top of the Hokage monument, now probably forcibly raped. Think. His mind searching for possible solutions. These girls were still from the village, and he couldn't touch them. He grasped onto a stand of idea. Reeling it in, he molded it in his mind into a solid thought. Ha! He yelled in triumph. In his right hand he formed Ragansan, charging it to insane levels. He then proceeded to let the energy from it pulse off. That way it would just make the girls let go. It almost worked if only Sakura hadn't woke up again. She shook her head a bit, clearing it as much as she could. Then, taken over by the scent again, lurching from her spot, she bull-rushed the other girls off the boy that was only a fresh piece of meat in her mind. Thank goodness, was his thought before he felt a pair of hands on his pants. Gah, he seemed to be saying that a lot now. Quickly kicking back, he re-zipped his pants and belted it much tighter than he usually did. Being the center of attention was great and all, but this was just too damned insane. Using his previous tactics, he head-butted her again, but he found that she had placed lots of chakra into her forehead. Ouch, was all he could muster before falling back. She smirked, she was going to have lots of fun with this boy. Leaning down, she huskily breathed on the side of his neck. Just because she wanted to ravish him didn't mean she couldn't be patient, but it was growing harder and harder with every passing second. But then she felt her head blank again as a sharp pain shot through her forehead. Gotcha, he spoke with victory. 30 grappling hooks flew up in the air, and once again landed around him. Not this time, you don't. Grabbing Sakura in bridal style, he gathered a large amount of chakra in his right leg, then smashing straight down, causing the ground beneath him to shatter. Leaping forward, he proceeded to head towards Tsunade. She could help him if anything was wrong. Ducking and weaving more so he landed on the ground. Even though he knew he was going to be at a disadvantage, maybe he could grab some help. Think, he commanded himself, and his head complied with a sharp tug at back of his mind. It was really hurting now. All this thought was beginning to eat away at what little sanity he had left from the battles of lust and love. Shikamaru. He bellowed out into the streets. Men everywhere were running around trying to stop their girlfriend, wives, and fiancés from running to their goal. Which they found had been Naruto. Cursing him loudly, he heard extremely vulgar things such as demonic pimp. Silently laughing, he was enjoying his new title. Demonic pimp it was. With Sakura slung in between his arms, he landed in front of Shikamaru's house. Kicking down the door, he found Shikamaru in an intense game of chess with himself. His head swiftly turned around, staring at Naruto and Sakura's limp body. "What happened?" he interrogated him. "No time, come on." Naruto bawled at Shikamaru. Ducking, he felt the rush of 3 kunais with more love letters attached to them. Leaping out with Shikamaru hot on his tails, he kept dodging flying objects. He couldn't get to Tsunade without a plan, so this was where Shikamaru came into play. Hitting the top of the gate, he busted up into the air, landing 200 meters away from the village or so. Shikamaru was tiring. For a genin, he had insane amounts of chakra. Then again, this was Naruto he was talking about. Sending more chakra into his legs, he was able to keep with Naruto. Looking forward, he saw that there were 5 girls surrounding him while he only used his 2 legs to fend off attacks. His arms preoccupied with Sakura. He was amused to say the least. These girls, instead of trying to land fatal blows on various parts of his bodies, they were groping him. He could barely contain his amusement. All of them dove and weaved, trying to pull off his pants or steal a quick kiss. Naruto should have been in a lust orgy or massive proportions, but it seemed his mind wasn't so weak after all. Sighing, he ran into the fray, applying quick blow to their necks, causing them to fall asleep. "Thanks, I was really getting worried for a second there," unleashing his sheepish grin of funny awkwardness. "Come on, just go already," Shikamaru said, smirking. Leaping up into the air, he ran farther out back to the wagon. It had taken them a good half-hour before reaching the remains of the wagon. The woman was nowhere in sight. Relaxing a bit, he laid Sakura next to the tree, where her picnic was. "It's weird, when this purple stuff got smeared on me, it's like all of them wanted to, you get the idea." Being too flushed to actually say anything coherent after that, he shut up. Scrounging around, he used his chakra to fine-tune his senses. Shikamaru finally let out an AHA, and pulled out a box. It was the same box the vial had come out. Shaking it around, he saw a manual fall down. Scanning it, he just laughed uncontrolled, falling to his knees. He held his stomach as laughter echoed around the forest. Rolling onto his back, he let out another monstrous roar of mirth. "What's so funny?" Naruto questioned, a little annoyed at Shikamaru. He had never seen his friend so shaken with laughter of all things. Quickly snatching the paper from the ground, he read it and his eyes started twitching. He understood, all those girls were trying to get into his pants. He thought they were all crazy, trying to rip off his nuts of something. "Get up, you stupid bastard," kicking Shikamaru roughly on his arm. Even this didn't stop the laughter, as he caused him to bellow even louder. Naruto, extremely pissed, slowly walked over to Sakura and sitting next to her. Waiting for quite a while as Shikamaru recovered from his lack of breathing. Tears streaming from his eyes, and trying to catch his breath, he walked over to his blonde-haired buddy. "Aha, I can't, believe this, happened to you," Shikamaru stated through hiccups and chuckles. "Okay, I get it, it was funny, now help me, you moron," talking a very dark and dangerous mood. Okay, he said, calming down. His mind started to shift gears in his mind. Well, it said on the manual that 5 milliliters would be enough to last 3 days. You got dosed with 50 milliliters. Snorting, he then calculated the time, other factors and unknown factors. This time he couldn't hold himself. He just let out a huge bursting roar of glee, tears rolling from his eyes, stomach in pain, couldn't breathe. "It's going to last 3.5 weeks. Yelling into the sky, forcing chakra into his muscles, causing them to digest air as he continued to laugh and laugh and laugh. "What?" Naruto, shocked and appalled. Inside joke for Comedy Central. "It's true, since you never really drank it, you got most of it smeared on your body. Taking into account the amount, length, effect and wear, it's going to last a good solid 3.5 weeks before it even begins to wear off." Barely able to contain his normal voice, he let out another solid burst of joy. "Oh Kami," he muttered in despair. "Sure, getting the girl was great, but I mean, this was just pushing it. 3.5 weeks is quite a bit of time, ya know," he finally let out, What the hell am I going to do for 3.5 weeks? He questioned, directing it to nobody really. Hokage Tsunade could probably fix it, Shikamaru suggested, obviously still recovering from bouts of laughter. Yeah, but isn't she a girl? Naruto asked, a bit of an undertone that told Shikamaru to tread carefully. Yeah she is, Shikamaru replied nervously. Naruto was getting pissed. This was not something you could do easily. Not on the scale he was doing it on anyways. Getting up, Shikamaru sat next to Naruto going into his tactics trance. Knowing what he was doing, he got up, pulling Sakura up and then slung her onto his back. Then he moved around a bit. He always dreamt that he and Sakura would be together, but not like this. This was morally wrong, and he didn't want this to happen. Not the way it was turning out anyways. Shikamaru stood up once again, and walked towards Naruto and Sakura. Well, I thought of something, but you won't like it too much, he stated, his mischievous tone was heard in the sentence. Who knew Shikamaru could be such a devious son of a bitch? Not Naruto, not in a million years could he imagine Shikamaru saying something like that. Your sensei should be able to help you. All you have to do is hand him this box and find him, Shikamaru said, his tone now underlying that of a serious one. Taking the box, and putting it in one of his large pockets, he hoped that things would turn out for the best. Retracing his steps, he thought of where Ero Sennin was. He dropped me off at the ramen shop, and started to the brothel, sighing. He leapt off towards the village, and inevitably his doom. He hated the brothel, the prostitutes there were shallow for the most part, trying to make a quick buck. He had met a few nice ones, they respected his wishes to stay, how could he state this, pure or chaste? Returning to the village, more cries of his new nickname aroused from the streets below. Jumping from rooftop to rooftop, he was still dodging the girls. But they were less now, he couldn't figure out why there were less. Maybe Shikamaru was wrong. Leaping to the new roof, he was caught. Looking down he saw at least 2,000 girls, pulling him into the wave of frenzied girls in heat. And maybe I'm Itachi. He yelled out angrily. But there were too many of them, they groped and kissed, tearing at his clothes. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Sakura please wake up, he begged. Kami taking pity on the boy, altered the fates. Sakura being infected with divine intervention awoke. Naruto, she breathed, thank you. He yelled into the heavens, until of course Sakura bit down on his neck, giving him a really painful hickey. Never mind, he echoed after his thanks to Kami. She was so intoxicated with his scent that, she just bathed in his scent. Plus so much of his clothes was off now she could feel his muscles brushing against her. Again with the heat infecting her, a second trait emerged. Jealousy that these girls were after Naruto. She did the unthinkable, jumping down to the ground. Or what part wasn't covered with a girl? She did a summoning a huge slug nearly a half-story high. It moved around, entrapping the girls. Naruto sighing as he saw reinforcement, knew that he wouldn't be raped this time. But it was pretty close. Another idea came up. Kage no Bushin, SP? He screamed at the top of his lungs. Then there were hundreds of Naruto being pinned down. The real one jumped up into the air and dispelled his shadow clones. The girls below cried their sorrow, and returned to the chase. Only to smack into the one person he did not need to see. Kiba, holding onto his girlfriend Hinata. I'll kill you, ya stupid bastard, what the hell did you do to all these girls? Tying her down, he charged at Naruto. I don't know what the hell is going on, he half bluffed. He honestly didn't know too much except they wanted to touch him in a lot of inappropriate manners. I'll kill you, demonic pimp. Kiba's eyes turning into a frenzy to kill. Crap was all he could think of, horde of girls, slugs, Kiba. Oh my, he was definitely screwed. Great, now Kiba wanted his ass. How could this possibly get worse? Hearing a faint rustle of leaves, he got tackled into the ground. Not by Kiba, but by Anko. It just got worse. Her eyes going into a desire to get into Naruto's ahem. Her need for him to satisfy her was greater than her need for blood. That was some craving she had there. Crap, was all he could think before he felt too really, and he meant really soft things rubbing against his chest. Plus her lips were around his throat, drawing blood and sucking on them gently. Killing two birds with one stone. Flipping backwards, he kneed Anko in the abdomen and a spiral kick to her face sent her sprawling, unconscious into the wall. The Junin was going to screw him over after this, but for now. Pushing himself up, he only fell down again as Kiba smacked his face extremely hard. The red imprint on his face pulsed before his brain got the message. Ouch! He yelled. What the hell was that for? He bellowed, right into Kiba's ear. With his higher level of hearing and that loud yell that could make a normal person go temporarily deaf. It obviously caused Kiba to go deaf. Swiping quickly at Naruto, he followed up with a low leg sweep and a pounce. Damn, too slow, he swore. Muttering a few curse words, he shoved a solider pill in his mouth. Taking off his vest, he allowed himself to not be as weighted down. The coat was actually a regulator of heat in his body. All his moves used went at such high speeds the velocity made their body shoot through the roof. With the coat they could regulate the temperature. It caused spikes in their chakra, telling them to not do anymore or else they would overheat and die. Taking off the coat allowed a large margin of increased speed, and less weight at the cost of having to monitoring your own heat. Both of them knew that they wouldn't use any real jutsu on each other. That would just be wrong, but they agreed to smack each other enough until one passes out. A reverse punch to the face caught Kiba off guard. Using the momentum, he used his right leg to spin and ricochet off the group to a fly knee kick to the face. Putting his arms in the shape of an X, he moved fast enough to block it. A fairly quick slide tackle sent him upwards. Using his chance, he jumped up, claws outstretched, and slashed what little remained of his clothes. Taking his chance, he grappled onto Kiba and then, thinking of the lotus technique used by Lee, spun down and smashed him onto the ground, knocking him unconscious. Breathing heavily, he had sprained his ankle a bit. Forcing chakra into his ankle, he healed the strain of the muscles, allowing him to jog away instead of limping painfully. He had to find Jiraiya in order to find a solution to his ever-growing problem. Luckily, he had found him beneath the shady tree of an inner courtyard of a brothel, gorging on grapes hand-fed by the ladies who had huge bosoms and very slender-like outlines. Jumping in, he took his sensei by the collar, heaved him up and jumped straight out of the village. Totally exhausting his chakra, and had passed out before he landed. Last thing he could remember was Jiraiya scream his head off, something about money, booze, girls, and dying. Couldn't have been important. Sakura, she wanted that boy bad. How could he have just run away from her? Amidst the crowd she was in, she was constantly tackling and charging the other Konichis down. Had she been any more rough, they would have had broken bones. The ones lagging behind her started to slow down and stop entirely. Staring in a bit of confusion, her body was compelled to follow a direction she was so greatly attracted to, only to feel it all dissipate instantly. She too dropped down onto the roofs, as other shinobis landed next to her, gathering their loved ones and taking them away slowly. She blinked and then slowly looked around. It was unnerving, she couldn't remember what the hell she was doing. Only she had been compelled to do it greatly. Naruto. Groggily he opened his eyes. Scanning his surroundings quickly, he panicked as he remembered doing something stupid. Whatever, he always did something brash. Silence penetrated all around him, and right through him. It was a calming and tranquil feeling. Jiraiya popped out of nowhere. What the hell? Naruto screamed at the top of his lungs. His sensei had just popped out of nowhere. Kakashi's transportation jutsu was feel-able, at least they could sense where he would come. Jiraiya had just popped into existence. A bit unnerved by overall fine, if of course you count totally exhausted out of chakra due to a ultra omega super jump 2.5 miles up into the air. Hurt all over from the impact into the ground probably, and this really annoying itch on the very middle that he could never itch. You could call it fine. You almost killed me, brat. Good thing I used your body as my impact shield, he said with a huge ass grin on his face. So that's why I feel like an elephant has been riding on my back, he answered sarcastically, whining and insulting his sensei at the same time. Giving him a very nasty look, Jiraiya replied, "See what I care, not like I was gonna heal your wounds anyways." While never openly admitting it, he would have never become as strong as he would have been right now if it wasn't for the fact Jiraiya had tutored him so far. He could only rely on the fox's powers so much, and it killed him on the inside knowing his curse was his blessing as well. He was going to keep it a curse, and curse it would be for all eternity. "How did you get such a powerful aphrodisiac?" his sensei asked out of the blue. "How do you know I got smeared with that crap?" he questioned. My data gathering sometimes has some predicaments," he smiled impishly. "Perv, the blonde genin muttered under his breath. Quickly recovering from his fall, he retold the events of his erotic escape. His sensei's eyes grew as wide as saucer plates. A minute into his story, the senin had pulled out his perverted book of ideas. Quickly writing them down, and then jotting more footnotes and ideas. Don't tell me you're going to put this in your books. The ocean-eyed boy yelled. This is great stuff. I have enough material to get 2 more books completed. I was looking for something to tie my 4th book with my 5th book, and this is it. He continued to ramble about his successful book. While he himself would never really enjoy the book, with the more girl-shy people of the village it had become a very popular book. He had already read the first 3, the 4th he was the beta reader, as Arrow Senin had dubbed him. The book itself was extremely intricate, and if applied to real life it would be very believable. Actually, the book was based on his sensei's own life, and some of his own now that the new books in the series were coming out. And that's how it happened, the orange-clad genin finished. His teacher stared at him starry-eyed and mystical-like. Then he broke out in a small smile and slowly said, I can't help you. He left it at that for about a minute. Of course, until there was a deafening screech that echoed through the forest. Followed by a punch and kick, a few yelps, and obviously the classic, oomph. What the hell do you mean you can't help me? Naruto bellowed at the top of his lungs. Like I said, brat, I can't help you. In all my years of travel, this has never happened before. Sighing dejectedly, he felt the blow of 1,000 rejections from Sakura-chan. Then he freaked out. Sakura-chan was still out there. Crap, I forgot to take her with me, he screamed, starting to run only to be tripped by Jiraiya. Slow down there, kid, she's Tsunade's kid, right? She should be able to handle herself, he answered the boy's thoughts. Getting up from the ground, he wiped the smudge and grime off his outfit, or what was left of his outfit. Oi, hand me my clothes, the demon vessel commanded. You mean the clothes I burnt? Silence was followed after the pervert had uttered these words. You burnt my clothes. Naruto continued to scream. Man, he was doing that a lot these days. Yes, orange is very tacky and I had to bleach my eyes just so that I could continue to see. Your damn outfit burns the retinas in my eyes, he continued to remark sarcastically. Whatever, but what the hell am I gonna wear now? I don't want to henge and waste what little chakra I have, he stated in a factual attitude. Here, take this. Reaching down into his pack, he pulled out an outfit. A very black and cool-looking outfit. Black? Black is much more tackier than orange, the blonde genin commented, causing a sweat drop to appear on his sensei's head. Geez, a monkey with Down syndrome has more fashion sense than he does, he thought dryly. Anyways, so what can I do to get this crap off? He continued to pester his sensei, slowly eroding away the built-up patience that man had built up over the years. Shut up, he screamed aloud, cooling down a bit after his pupil had flown right into a tree head first. He continued. Like I said, I don't know much to do with this level of aphrodisiac. But I can give you a basic outline on how to dispel it faster. First, you have to perform a blood seal. Don't worry, it isn't permanent. Blood seals are used to remove a status you have. He continued to ramble about useless crap, which Naruto only processed the important stuff. Then you have to drink the aphrodisiac's anti-flower, which is the flower that is grown to counteract the flower used in the bottle. Finally, you have to find a girlfriend for the aphrodisiac to waver. It acts on loyalty, this stuff does, so if you're already loyal to somebody the effects will become much less intense for everybody else, but about 3 times more intense for your mate. So it's pretty much a give and take. He continued to talk about the ramifications of the vial that was smashed onto him. Then threw a scroll at Naruto's head. Ouch, what the hell is this? He muttered under his breath. Opening up the scroll, he sighed. That there is everything I told you, the jutsu, the flower, and the girlfriend thing. I have to gather more information, he commented, disappearing in a cloud of ninja smoke. Laying on his back, he sighed once again. Pervert, he thought. His body started to recover from his super jump, and he relaxed. His thoughts slowly drifting off, dreams about which girl to pick as his girlfriend. Well, he would have, if it wasn't for the fact there was over 500 shurikens, 200 kunai, 10 windmill kunai, 5 daggers, 2 dirks, and 1 big-ass katana heading his way. All of course with a love note attached to them. Behind him was the black-haired beauty herself. 10-10, he whispered, before he became a pincushion for her maelstrom of insanity. Wow, how the hell did I come up with this? Tima Naru coming right up. The auction. Part 1. No, but Naruto, please be reasonable. We are short on funds and we need every last mail to do this. No, please. Tsunade echoed from her other bags. Sigh, she knew it was a bad idea trying to ask Naruto to do this. This year they had been a bit under the line. The other countries were getting more business from foreigners from past the waters. So they were going down, inflation was getting high and they needed government stability to take of that. To have government stability they needed money, lots of money. So they decided to have an auction. Not just any auction, a dating auction. They were gathering as many men as possible so that the high bidder would get a date with this fine gentleman. Tsunade had even been able to persuade Kakashi and Asuma. Guy was no problem. Actually he begged to get onto the roster. She needed some younger teens to take the lineup too. Neji had been easy. All she had to do was threaten the clan he was in. Kiba had gone, Shino after being forced by his mother and father, who was forced upon by the Hokage. Shikamaru had gone, but not after muttering, how troublesome. Koji had also gotten on the roster, but he had to lose weight to be on. Rock Lee had also begged to get on, while Sasuke was dragged on by Kakashi, saying that if had to do it, his successor would have to do it too. Naruto was the only one who hadn't gone on. They both knew he would get the least amount of money, but he would still get quite a sum. The Hokage slightly smirked, if they knew Naruto the way she knew him. Those girls would be selling their house to get a date with this boy. Before Naruto had left on his 3-year leave with Jiraiya she had invited them over to dinner. Not to be perverted, but the blonde genin looked fine. Too fine for a 12-year-old, she herself found herself strangely attracted to the boy. This had been he was 12 for God's sake. Now he was 16, and his polite charm and looks were gonna get him far in life. When he came over, he was wearing something the pervert Sanin had given him. A sleek silk tuxedo outfit, a platinum tie. He actually did his hair, sleeked it back, and had cologne. He decided to be a gentleman and had asked Shizune to be his date for that night. Never had she seen him such a charmer, polite manners, kindly affection, and a very good sense of humor. It was a shame he didn't bring it out more, because when she came back with her assistant, Shizune swooned onto her bed and passed out. He was a charmer indeed. He was 16. The girls were gonna grope him if he was presented onto the stage. Please, she repeated again, this time with a bit more force. No, but his voice was faltering. Seizing her chance by the horns she took it and pulled it down. You will go, she commanded, her tone full of icy indignation from arguing. Fine, the boy's defense had cracked. Walking out he sighed. Why did he agree again? Oh yeah, to raise money. Naruto. Great, now he had to ask he perverted sensei for another outfit. While he never really showed it, he was quite the gentleman at heart. Taking his hands together, he made a quick hand seal. His chakra pulsated and flew in a full circle out. The jutsu was a direction locator. By make chakra bounce off a specific signal he could tell which direction. Not the distance however. Getting the bounce back he headed northwest towards the largest brothel he had ever seen. Quick motions and his body had hinged into a person who had walked out with a name tag. Walking in, he quickly looked at the list of names and numbers. Finding his sensei had rushed to that room, grabbed the fat man, and dragged him off. About 50 meters away from the village, he finally set down his mentor and sighed. Again, I need a favor, he slowly said. Jiraiya was not pleased. He had paid top dollar for that room. He had been guaranteed 3 hours, and 2.5 hours in his student had dragged him out. What do you need now? You could have just asked me instead of dragging me out here. I need a new suit, he said with a bit of hate in his voice. I agreed to be in the auction, he trailed off. The auction? Why didn't you say so? We really had to get you jazzed up for this. All those girls will be so irked that they won't get you. Jiraiya quickly jotted more notes in his head for his book. Then turning onto Naruto he had a very strange glint in his eye. When does the auction start? He asked nonchalantly. At around 7 tonight, it'll last until 12. He brushed it off as non-important info. Thinking quickly he crunched some numbers. It started in 8 hours. So that would give him barely enough time to really get Naruto good looking. We're gonna spend the entire day making you look good, he commanded. Naruto, looking a bit unnerved, was only able to mouth, why? Before being whisked away into a flurry of clothes. makeup, gel, haircuts, and other apparels of goodies. The auction. Sold. To Hinata Hyuga. Kiba, please join Ms. Hyuga at the main entrance please. The announcer yelled into the microphone. Kiba slowly stepped out of one of the row of the black boxes. He had been big on 12 times, before Hinata finished bidding on him with 10,000 ryus. Grinning, he locked his arms into Hinata's and they strolled down the aisle. Kakashi had been taken by Anko, as she mischievously kissed him on the cheek. 75,000 ryus. Genma had been picked by Kurenai, her red eyes glinting with glee as she dragged him. 45,000 ryus. Neji had been big on by many a people, but he was finally gotten by a young girl from a prestige clan. 70,000 ryus. Shino had oddly been popular, he scored a 30,000 with a very feisty red-haired girl. Shikamaru was bid upon 5 girls, before Ino took the stand and offered 35,000 ryus. Koji had called sick, and left before he was bid upon. Guy had been gotten for 15,000 looking a bit nervous as a very fine-looking young lady took him by the hand and pulled him out. Rock Lee had been bid upon by 5,000 ryus. Before, between and after had been many other shinobi and village men. Each man was hidden behind a black box. No men saw the others or anybody outside until they were called. Sasuke was dressed as normal, but when the announcer got to his name the crowd went wild. 200 bids later, and he was bid upon for 150,000 ryus. Walking down the aisle with a very smug girl, he visibly sweat dropped as she tried to grope him in an awkward manner. The last box had a huge label on it like the others, Uzumaki Naruto, was plastered on it. Many girls sneered when they all knew he wouldn't get many bids. Let's start off the bid at 1,000 ryus, he started. Gaara and Temari were far in the back, looking bored. They had only been here for Naruto to see what he had looked like. From amidst the crowd they heard a shrill, 50,000 ryus. Shocking everyone, including Gaara. Shizune smirked in triumph as she lowered her hand. 50,000 ryus from Shizune. Can we hear a 65,000 ryus? He asked aloud. Gaara was looking a bit nervous. He thought his sister would take up the offer and bid by now but she hadn't. The case cage reached into his pocket and pulled out a heft bag. Shoving it into her hand, she heard a, bid now. He hissed loudly. She flinched knowing very well that if she didn't comply he would still rip her to shreds. Raising her hand she yelled a swift, 300,000 ryus. Even the Hokage sputtered for a second, 300,000 ryus. That was an insane amount. Scanning the crowd for Shizune she saw her assistant's crestfallen smile. Knowing very well that she couldn't have Naruto, but the other girls could. She was fine with that. 300,000 ryus. Going once. Going twice. Sold. To Temari of the Sand, the auctioneer yelled. The girls were shocked at how such an ugly, loud-mouthed brat could have gotten a higher bid than Sasuke. All of them bit their tongues, as their eyes grew in disbelief. Uzumaki Naruto walked out from his black box. Damn, he looked fine. Hundreds of girls started to salivate at the sight of him. Not even the cold-hearted Sasuke had made them do this. 50 of the girls fainted on the spot, most just opened their jaws. Gaara smirked a fiendish smirk, while Temari too stared in disbelief. Naruto was hot, and that was an understatement. It was the understatement of the millennium. His blonde hair no longer dirty, was sleeked back shiny and shone under the full moon. His outfit consisted of a white dress shirt beneath his satin and silk tuxedo coat. His pants were a gorgeous dark black, matching his upper coat. Around his back was draped a cape that looked very nice, with red and gold embedded thread. A thing necklace hung around his neck, the one Tsunade had given him. A cane in his right hand, and a gold pocket watch in his left corner pocket. The girls who had already bought their dates, cursed silently. They all knew that they wouldn't have bid on the blonde-haired boy themselves. But now they instantly regretted it. Watching carefully, the crowd watched as Naruto stepped onto the main stage. Biting the tip of his thumb he shouted a summoning jutsu. As a great golden Chinese-like dragon appeared. Its whiskers flowing, its body mystic and mesmerizing. Leaping onto its back, he flew towards Temari and grabbed her hand. She let out an audible gasp as he flew straight into the air. The girls below all distressed by how cool he had left. This wasn't really a dragon though, it was actually a jutsu that utilized a preset chakra division of points, allowing it to take the shape of a creature. Jiraiya and Naruto had sat there brainstorming ideas, and designing it for 2 of their 8 hours. Hugging her arms around Naruto, she squeaked as she looked down. Not being one to show weakness, she felt very vulnerable. The ground was her home, and she had a slight phobia of heights. Sure, running and jumping from tree to tree was okay. At least she wasn't that far off the ground, but she was up into the clouds now. That was a huge step up from the trees. "Don't worry, I won't let you fall," he gently whispered into her ear, sending spine-tingling shivers down her back. The way he said it just touched her somehow. Turning his head, he faced the front again. Smiling, he gripped onto the dragon's hornpiece. It was placed there for turning. Pushing down a bit roughly, they both plunged down. His cape flapping, Tamari screaming and gripping her hands around his waist. He grinned as they plunged towards the lake, on to the rest of their date. Crap, that was all he could muster as he started to weave through the weapons. Then again it was fruitless, because she was known to hit her target 100 out of 100 times. Dumb technicalities. Forming seemingly endless hand seals, shadow clone after shadow clone appeared. Each one either deflected weapons or took the damage. The landscape was riddled with ninja smoke, weapons, gear, a very strong female voice, a pleading submissive male voice. And of course, something that couldn't be a scene without this. Chaos. Just utter chaos. Bushins were disappearing left and right, kunai and shurikens embed into the ground or the surrounding trees. When he had finally managed to get past the weapons, he was caught off guard with multiple throwing projectiles, all of them catching a part of his outfit, pinning him to the tree. As if things could get worse, Tenten was wearing little clothes. When he meant little, he didn't mean midriff showing. He meant, "I am Tarzan, king of the jungle," loincloth clothes. Maybe he should have watched where he was deflecting those weapons to. She was so close to him now, that she could have breathed and he could have felt it on his neck. Enticing his lips upon hers, he was intoxicated at the level of savageness this usually calm and endearing girl was giving him. His lips were bruised and bleeding now, so was hers. She thought she had him in the palm of her hand. Little did she know that the blonde genin had already gotten his legs free. 2 smacks to the shin, a leg sweep, and a headbutt later. He sat sighing. Here he was. Again, with a girl. Again, who was trying to get into his pants. Again, life sucked. Well, not really, but it was too troublesome, if you put it in Shikamaru's term. Getting up, he grabbed the girl by all her limbs. He had tied her arms and legs together behind her back. So he just carried her around like a briefcase, except this one was wide and could bite you. Lifting her body above the ground, he held the scroll in one arm. Scanning over it quickly, he ticked off the things he needed to accomplish so that the damn aphrodisiac wore off. The blood seal was going to destroy the effect by about 5, not much, but it would have to do. The requirements needed of the blood sealer, to mix his blood with one of the people being affected. Tenten, check. The other requirement was the girl had to be willing to give up her blood, or else the seal wouldn't work. He glanced towards the girl who was growling viciously, her normal tranquil eyes turning into a savage vibrant. Sighing, he had to figure that out. But not now. Looking over the blood seal again, he needed only those 2 requirements, but the hand seals were huge. 300 hand seals. Man, this was just not his day. Setting down the girl, he bit his thumb and began to mark out the intricate designs needed to perform the seal. 5 minutes in, he could hear a grunt as Tenten tried to untangle herself from the length of rope. He disregarded it after glancing towards Yue. She was still struggling, but stopped being so loud. There, he stepped back and admired his handiwork. Pretty good for an amateur sealist. His thumb had dried up by now, so he bit into his index finger and let the blood drip down into the center. Sitting down cross-legged, he took one of the weapon master's hand and laid it upon his knee. "Are you going to give me your willing or not?" he requested, looking at her for a bit. She looked a bit unsteadily, but then let out a throaty growl that probably meant no. Sighing dejectedly, he had to think of another way to get her blood with her permission. If he let her go, then she would jump him in an instant. If he bargained with her, maybe that would work. "I'll give you my kunai set given onto me by the 3rd Hokage," he offered. It really was precious to him, one of the few memorials he had of the 3rd. The only person besides Aruka to ever really acknowledge him. She looked up at him, the aphrodisiac breaking off slightly. But it returned with a vengeance, like a master beating its slave for even thinking about escaping. Looking down, he saw that had no effect. Racking his mind once more, he searched for an answer. Anything that would make her give up her blood willingly. Then it clicked: after the aphrodisiac wore off, she wouldn't be attracted to him. "If you give your blood willingly, I'll be your boyfriend," he offered with a tad of hopefulness in his voice. Again she looked at him, but this time with heartfelt eyes deep with emotion. Instantly he regretted his decision. Crazed lady or not, temporary or not, he didn't feel right lying to her about being her boyfriend. It was against his nindo. Groaning, he decided he would keep his promise and date the girl. "So will you give me your blood?" He glanced towards her way. Looking up once again, she gave a brief nod before returning to her hungry primal state. "Take her hand," he gently bit down onto her thumb. Hearing a gasp from her, he did it quick so that she wouldn't have to suffer much longer. Then he splashed a bit of blood onto the seal. Sitting down, he started his hand seals while glancing towards the scroll every once in a while. 299, 300. Finally he finished as he placed his hands onto the seal to feel the effect. What he had in mind was not what he expected. The second he placed his hand onto the sealed tenton, instantly broke through the hand binds and jumped him. Tackling him to the ground, she straddled him into an uncomfortable position. But now she didn't have a crazed look in her eye. Forming his hands into seals again, he created more shadow clones that quickly overtook her. Her lack of weapons left her offense and defense very low. Binding her once again, he understood what had happened. In order for the effect to wear off a bit, there had to be an oversurge of the feeling. It was like charging so much into something that it eventually exploded. Now for the flower. Looking over the scroll again, he looked for the location of the flower. Of course he sighed. I mean, why wouldn't you sigh if you've been through so much crap? The flower was the only one owned for miles. The shop that owned it was Ino's mother. He would have to go back into the village. Picking up Tenten once again, he carried her down the trail back into the village. Sakura. The feel, it was returning. But it wasn't as strong as before, still she was compelled by it. Its force bring her to him. It was a powerful feeling she could not ignore. Before completely losing control of her body and will, she saw that other woman had already left. She then jumped up again, and leapt towards the source of her desires. Beside her was her own rival and friend, Ino. Even with the aphrodisiac taking effect upon them, they still raced each other to reach their goal first. It was a do or die sort of thing between them, still this time it was for a feeling they needed to fulfill. Not a boy that they craved for. Naruto and Tenten. He was of course trying to be stealthy, but forgot that his smell could be picked up by the females. Cursing his bad luck, he raced through the village, scanning for the flower shop. There, he spotted it instantly, because there was a man that looked a lot like Ino, and so he assumed that was his father. Appearing at the flower shop, he walked in. "Please, do you have a Cynthiana crystal flower?" he pleaded to the man. Ino's father. He was hesitant. Who wouldn't be? There was this boy, who he knew to be the container to the fox demon. He was carrying a girl, with black hair and barely wore anything. Asking for one of his rarest flowers, that he knew was the only one for miles afar. "What do you want, kid?" he asked, getting over his own reluctance. There was only one real use for the flower, and that was to counter an aphrodisiac. Judging by the way he looked and the growling girl that snapped at his pants every once in a while, he pretty much figured out what was going on. "Can I buy your flower?" he asked quickly, glancing back at the door. "Sure, kid, it'll be 20,000 ryus, he replied gently. Hearing a gasp, he heard Naruto drop the girl for a second, only to catch her in mid-air the next. Grumbling, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. 20,000 ryus it is, he mumbled something about a con artist. He was greatly surprised that the kid even had a checkbook, much less 20,000 ryus. Quickly signing his check, he handed it to the man, who in turn gave him the flower, which he instantly shoved down his mouth. Hacking and coughing, he tasted its bitter and tart taste. It was horrible, almost as bad as his first taste at wasabi ramen with pig intestines. The man glanced down at the check to make sure it was real. He laughed out loud a bit after the boy left. On the check within the background was a huge frog and fox jumping and leaping around, while there was a slug eating ramen, and all of them were under a huge sakura tree. Typical. He looked outside again and saw that there were hundreds of girls running down the street. But some of them seemed to have slowed down, and showed a bit less savagery for their target, which he assumed was Naruto after his little encounter. Naruto and Tenten. He had to find his sensei in order to find out how to make it so that she would be his girlfriend. He was jumping from building to building now, the occasional girl catching up to him. Tenten was a very effective weapon if he might say so himself. This demonic pimp was hot. Racking his mind for the location of his teacher, he thought of it. The bookstore. They were releasing the 4th book of his perverted series today, and he was signing them as an author's special gift. Rushing towards the bookstore, he saw Kakashi, Guy, even Genma was there. Why is it that all my sensei are perverts? He wondered aloud, earning him a very odd-sounding giggle from Tenten. It was a cross between a chuckle and a demonic laugh. When he finally reached the bookstore, he saw a huge line of people waiting. Both shinobi and villager were standing in a huge line. Brushing them aside, he got in close enough to his teacher. Of course, everybody knew that every action has an opposite reaction. When he pushed aside the villagers and shinobi, they were going to push back. Push back they did. Grabbing the genin by his shoulders, they chucked him out with great force, only to puff into smoke and reappear next to his perverted master. He then glanced towards the people in line, looking really pissed. Unlike the way the girls looked at him with hunger and lust. They looked at him with a face that said, "I'm gonna unleash a can of whoop-ass on you." Crap. He ran out with a very confused Tenten. Turning around, he spotted his white-haired sensei. So how do I make her my girlfriend for the damn aphrodisiac to stop? The orange-clad boy shouted to his white-haired sensei. You sleep with her, what else? He instantly fainted from shock, leaving his fate up to his to-be girlfriend and his arrow senin. Sitting at the table, he sighed to himself. How did he get into this situation? To put it simply, it was awkward to say the least. He sat here now, his dirty blonde hair every so wild. He was at the table in which 5 girls sat there talking avidly. He tried to join, but he couldn't. He didn't understand girls. Not that he didn't want to, it's just that his views of girls would have most likely been corrupted if he told Jiraiya about it. Ino, you have to try this. The pink-haired girl cried aloud. While Sasuke was gone, she and Ino both had returned their friendship. To think that somebody had broken a bond they had both treasured for so long. Taking it between, she started to lick it. Lick it so softly and gently that she sucked on it a bit, the saliva moistening it ever bit more. Taking a bit of the cream, she swallowed it a bit. Oh, it's so good, she moaned aloud. Tenten, looking a bit curious, took out her kunai and smeared some of the cream on Ino's face onto her kunai. Taking it, she licked it ever precariously. Moaning, she put more than half of the kunai in her mouth. So creamy, she purred out. His sapphire eyes nearly glazed over. He stared at the Chinese Kunichi, wondering why she had done that. Ino, stop hogging Naruto's meat stick for yourself. Sakura cried aloud, taking it. Hey, that was mine. Ino yelled in return. Both of them were trying to suck on it ever more. It's so juicy. Both cried aloud. The girl with pure white eyes licked her lips a bit. She looked almost erotic as it seemed like she was going to pounce on his stick. So good, Tamari whispered huskily as she shoved it deeper into the orifice of her mouth. Creamy white pearl droplets dissolving in her throat. A scream was heard as velvety cream like goo got smeared all over Sakura's face. Taking a finger, the weapons master wiped a lot of it and smeared it around her lips, droning out a sigh of content as she savored the flavor with her mouth. A muffle was heard as they all looked back towards the innocent girl shoving the large girth of meat down her throat. All the other girls were amazed that she could shove it that deep in her throat. Suddenly she cried out and pulled the log out of her mouth. Her mouth salivating, and a bit of drool was dripping out a corner of her lip. A tint of white was apparent within it. How did you do that? I can only get it a fraction of the way down, he saw the blonde mind walker exclaimed. I've always had an affinity of shoving big long things down my throat. She took a deep breath and continued. Besides, I have had lots of practice. My father always says it amazes him that I can shove his meat down so deep. Sakura and Ino both looked at Hinata with starry eyes. Tenten looked at her with a bit of jealousy and envy, while Tamari glanced a bit her ways, before taking the meat stick from her and shoving it all the way down to the base of the stick. All of the other girls gasped as Tamari pulled it back out, smacking her lips. Pretty good, she commented before nibbling on the end. Groaning, Naruto's eyes rolled back into their sockets. But he held onto the table and calmed himself down. He chided himself, he was having the time of his life. Why should he end it so soon? Tenten looked away for a second. She turned and bent over, a huge gulp was heard as she returned with a face plastered with soft fluffy cream. It was smeared all over her face, as she laughed out loud a bit. Some of it got on the tip of her nose. She smacked her lips again as she started to lick all the parts on her face as she could. She could even touch her own nose. The rest of the girls looked on with curiosity. Tenten's tongue was strangely long, as it could reach the very edge of her cheeks. Temari and Tenten both had talents. Hinata looked with fierce determination in her eyes. Taking the hard object out of her hand, she shoved it in her mouth. Her tongue swirled around in and out, as she sucked on it violently. Naruto's almost fell out of the chair as she continued to inhale. The velvety cream trickled down her chin and in the back of her throat. The remaining two, with no real power with their mouth, looked desperate for something they could do. Holding her breath for a second, she took Naruto's meat stick and it busted instantly. The 8-inch monster exploded, spraying her with bits of opaque goo. Sakura looked anxious now. All of the other girls had some gift they could do with their mouth. She didn't, not until she thought of something. Taking it, she put a part of it on a plate, and then rubbed it against her stomach, smearing a bits of rich cream around her stomach. She then proceeded to pant at such an odd angle and licked it right out of her navel. His eyes finally glazed over as he fell back over his chair. Blood spurting out of his nose like a stream. His eyes confused and dizzy. His mind racing, his heart beating frantically. What's wrong, Naruto-kun? Tenten said as she started to munch on the frosting Naruto had made with his cake for Sakura's late birthday. Temari shrugged, and then shoved the lollipop into her mouth again. Taking it out of her mouth, she sighed. I must know how you make these lollipops. They are so milky and creamy, it's just so good. Sakura and Ino giggled a bit as they bit into Naruto's cake for Sakura. The moist layers were quite good, as the frosting was white with a very distinct vanilla flavor. Cinnamon was apparent with the brownish sprinkles all on top of the cake. Naruto-kun, what's wrong? Hinata wailed out loud, the large piece of beef jerky stick in her hand. Grunting out loud, Naruto opened his eyes. He was slick with sweat, a thin film of it covered his entire body. He needed a cold shower. Quick, the auction. Part 2. Wind rushing in their faces, they made a breakneck pace straight down. Laughing merrily in the air, he grinned in spite of Temari's consistent screaming. Her voice echoing all around the valley, which the lake was in. Dispelling the dragon, he felt her hands constricting his airflow as she gripped his waist and chest even harder. Free falling was one of the best parts of the experience, it was almost like they were flying. Forming quick hand seals, he sent a burst of chakra-induced air to the ground, creating a sort of cushion as both of them soared into landing. Still a bit shaken from their experience, he had set her down next to a tree, leaving his cape around her body for her to conserve her warmth. Using it as a blanket, she wrapped herself tight within the cape. She had grown up in the sand, it was blaring hot almost all the time, and the rapid change in the temperature had shocked her. Strolling slowly to a tree at the edge of the lake, he found a scroll pinned onto it. Reaching out, he grabbed it and walked to the very edge of the lake. Laying it onto the water, it floated around. Biting his thumb, he smeared blood onto the scroll. The scroll ignited into a blinding light and surrounded the entire area. The lake instantly froze up, going to -30 degrees F. Walking over to Temari, he handed her a pair of skates that mysteriously appeared in a puff of ninja smoke. She looked at the leather shoes with a metal piece on the bottom, with questionable ideas. He then showed her an example. Taking off his shoe, he placed it on the ground. Putting his hand onto the skate, he put his foot into it and got up, only to fall down with an oomph, and Temari giggled a very girlish laugh. Ha-hawing a very sarcastic-filled laugh. He got up again and kneeled down. Taking her foot, he placed it within the skate she had, being very gentle, and her body eased up at the warmth of his touch. She actually blushed as he finished tying the laces of her skates. Standing up, he reached out with his hands and offered her his help to get her up. Smiling a soft smile, she accepted it gratefully. Using a bit of force, he had gotten her off the ground, and proceeded to get her to the frozen lake. the snowflakes gently drifting down in a haze. Never in her life had she seen such a spectacular spectacle. The sand never had these, their climate had been too hot or extreme for anything this soft and gentle. Clumsily she tried to walk on the ice, only to fall over while she was practicing. Hearing a hearty laugh echoing through the forest, she glared daggers at his laugher, instantly shutting up the blue-eyed boy. Her smile returned when she started to get the hang of the movements. However, she turned a bright red when the blonde boy just started to circle around her, taunting her a little, forcing her to work even harder to match his movements. When he smirked, that did two things that totally confused her. One, it made her so very angry that she wanted to strangle him, but the other was very strange. He made her blush, a deep cream pink blush that she never felt before. Within minutes of messing up and trials she had gotten the hang of his maneuvers, her quick thinking allowing her to improvise on the go. When he did a quadruple spinning flip in the air landing on one foot at a 34-degree bent leg. She tried, and obviously failed miserably. Naruto, noticing that the impact was going to be especially painful, soared across the ice and leapt to catch her within his arms, causing the already blushing Temari of the sand to blush a few hundred more shades of red. He grinned at her with his trademark foxy grin. Of course she blushed another few hundred shades. Setting her down on her feet, she unsteadily got back into the rhythm of moving across the ice. He was right beside her, the look in her eye was that she was challenging him to a race. With a blink he raced off, she pushed herself to catch up. The wind rushed to their faces, and both let out bouts of laughs. Both were accelerating at high speeds, but Naruto was caught off guard when the blonde-haired girl jumped right next to him. Catching him off guard for the first time, he swerved off. Grabbing onto the sand girl's hand, he sent both of them sprawling into the bank. Obviously this landed them in a very compromising position. Both of them were noticeably extremely vulnerable, but of course they were awkward teenagers with raging hormones. So what else could they do? Kiss, that's what. Looking closer, she saw his eyes turn from a gentle sky blue to a confused sapphire. Taking control, she flipped him over, pinning his wrist above his head with her own arms. But she didn't go into the kill instantly. She slowly inched down towards his face, her breath brushing against his lips. His lips twitched a bit in anticipation. Their almost kiss was short-lived as a toad appeared out of nowhere. Smiling a bit of a disappointed smile, he glanced towards Temari, who too had the same look. Quickly hooking his arm with hers, he led them to the toad. The toad was fairly large for a frog, that is, but even human standards it was pretty big. About twice the size of a car, and probably 5 times the weight. Lifting her by the waist, he sat up on the back of the frog. Leaping onto the frog himself, he pursed his lips and let out a wailing whistle. The toad instantly looked alert. Up top, the blonde boy told it to go to dinner. Having already done this before, he knew exactly where to go. He arched himself and then got ready to leap. Both blondes braced themselves as they vaulted straight into the air at an incredible height. Both of their clothes were getting a bit damp as they touched the clouds up in the sky. Taking the chance, he instantly dispelled the frog. They were free falling once again. He loved the feeling of flight, of being in the air. Temari, on the other hand, freaked out badly as she clutched him like an old teddy bear that she had so long ago. He smiled as they neared the restaurant. There was a field with a large target-like mark on the field. North of it was a simple dining table, light with glowing water infused with chakra. A soft descent had occurred. As they landed within the target, he gently whispered in her ear. "I can stay like this all night if you want," he whispered mischievously into her ear. She had a yelp as she let go, almost as if her hands were set on fire. Cheeks burning red, she once again glared at him while holding her hand. Chuckling, he dragged her to the dining table, in which he told her to close her eyes. Forming chakra, he formed over 50 hand seals in less than 5 seconds. She felt the air around her shift, the atoms moving and changing almost. "Open them," he murmured to her. Lifting her eyelids, she caught her own breath. In front of her was the most elegant dinner she had ever seen. That wasn't it, thought, it was the scenery. The ground beneath them had turned into water. They were sitting on top of water without concentrating. Fish swam quietly beneath them, but when she looked up she saw the moon. The clouds above them disappeared, showing the moon. The stars in the sky shone brightly against its black background. Looking towards him, she saw that he lit the candle in the center of the table. Slowly he served her the turkey, vegetables, fruits, and other lavish foods onto her plate. Not a single ramen item on the table. She was mildly surprised. But he probably knew that if he did make ramen she would pound his face into the ground. Why did she care? Her face was burning again as she thought the most unperceivable thoughts. It had only been 4 hours since the auction, and now she was thinking thoughts about why this golden god of a man stood before her. She had to get her mind out of the gutter. Continuing to ravage her food, she left all thoughts bothering her. When they were done, she sat there in a while. Her thoughts drifted back onto the golden boy. His hair, his grin, his attitude, his soul-saving abilities. She noticed the table rumble a tad and looked up. He was standing now with his arms outstretched. "Do you trust me?" he deviously asked her. His grin telling her that if she said yes, she would be doing something most people would never get to do. Ever. She sat there for a moment, weighing it. She trusted the boy, more than anybody she trusted before. She trusted him more than she trusted Gaara to complete a mission. Hesitantly she reached out her hand and he took it, lifted her up from his seat. He leaned closer and encased her around in his arms, causing her to become beet red and him to chuckle a bit more. Blowing into her ear she felt extremely confused. "Is that part of the thing you're going to do?" she asked him hesitantly. "No, I just want to see how you would react," he artfully told her in a hushed voice. Her face turned a pink rose tint. She had a huge urge to smack him upside his head, but the other side want to hug him for being adorable. Adorable? When did she think he was adorable? He let out a soft chuckle, then grabbing her hand he molded her hand into half of a dragon seal. Then using his other hand he created the other half of the dragon seal. Clasping her hand to his, she felt a warm sensation of chakra flow through her body. She felt the ground beneath them turn into a jelly of some sort, then she felt her legs going downwards. Suddenly, they were submerging. Underwater. Their bodies went slowly under, the fish darted away. When they reached the bottom, there were formations of rock set out in a way for two people to sit and relax lazily as things passed them by. She felt her body get cold. Then she saw Naruto seal his hands into multiple ram's seals with different variations of the rabbit and rooster seals. Then she felt her mind become lighter as her body instantly warmed up. She wasn't getting wet, and she could breathe as well as talk. When they landed to the formation, he set her down gently onto the rock. It cushioned into her body as it was the feeling of solid air encasing her being. Her muscles relaxed and she looked up onto the surreal world. The water was distorting her vision, but it calmed her mind down. The fish swam lazily by, as the moon highlighted the deep lake. She had never been this relaxed in her entire life. Her eyes looked ahead, her thoughts drifting onto thoughts she would never dream of thinking about. Boys, love, children, family, caring, babies, Naruto. Naruto, Naruto, Naruto. The boy's name sounded so right in her mind, on her tongue. It was like this was her other half. The half she had lost as child, the one where fantasy lived and her inner child was. That side of her died while she grew up. Her real father and mother died when she was barely a year old. She had been exposed to hundreds of deaths before she was 5. She had killed before she was 10, she had murdered by the time she was 13. Her hands were stained with bloods of hundreds if not thousands. Her mind trembled, her body shook. She wept controllably. Her mind was numb, she just cried out her sorrow, her guilt, her hate, her sadness. It was the first time in a long time she had felt the long-lost feeling of salty droplets upon her cheek. He looked worried, he was confused, and didn't know what to do. He was an expert in fighting and not girls, more so of crying girls. He always hated when people cried, especially girls. He didn't know what to do, so he did what he could. He hugged her close, stroking her hair, soothing her down as she continued to weep into his shoulder. "I must seem so weak to you," she mumbled into his damp tucks. "No, you're not weak. Crying is a sign that you care and you have emotion. Feelings are stronger than any fighting power anybody could teach you," he told her comfortingly. She looked up, her emerald eyes clashing with his sapphire. Leaning closer she felt their lips brush against one another. After a split second they split apart, both of them blushing. Her cheeks were once again a beet red, as he smiled a soft smile. Reaching out with his arm he grabbed her hand and held them tightly together, reassuring her that he would be here. Moving closer together, he held her in a tight embrace. As they resumed watching the wondrous world he created, holding each other a little closer than before. Jiraiya. I felt my face pale as I saw a group of very angry groupies swarm my pupil. Well, groupies and one girl, she was doing a pretty good job protecting him from the ass whooping he would have gotten. Getting desperate, I needed to get him out of his little trouble. Reaching into my vest, I pulled out Come Come Harmony. In my hand is Come Come Paradise, Harmony Book 4 of the Icha Icha Paradise series. This book here is signed by me with a special preview edition of Book 5. Come Come Paradise, Fantasy. I yelled out to the crowd. Instantly every single person who had read even a sentence of my books had turned their heads towards him. Yip, I squeaked aloud. Chucking the book straight up, I made a mad dash towards my unconscious student. Picking him up in one swoop, I also snagged the girl too, because well, she was clutching onto him like a rag doll. Pulling him, I leapt onto the buildings up top and sped through the town like a cat chased by dogs. Upon seeing the entrance, I braced my footing as I soared off again. The girl latched onto his thigh was growling at the ground because it was so far away. Landing onto the rough ground, I tumbled into a smooth landing. Then I propped his pupil up against a tree while the girl constantly, it was too perverted, even for me, to say. Man, I hope I didn't scar him too bad. You'd think after spending all the time with me he would be okay with the idea of? I thought to myself, until I got a perverted grin plastered on my face and started giggling. Looking over, I saw the girl maneuver Naruto in an awkward position and then, my god, instantly taking out my notebook, I started jotting down notes and sketching some pictures of what they were doing. This is gold. I wept aloud with tears of joy flowing freely from my eyes. More material for my so that I could finish Come Come Paradise Book 6. Come Come Paradise, Desire. I was going to be rich. Until I heard a massive rumbling of girls. Turning around, I saw a huge wave of girls rush towards me. Thanking Kami, I opened my arms wide and yelled, I'm here, ladies. Only to have them rush past me onto Naruto as the weird chick was circling his body. I crumbled onto the ground into a heaping mess, fetal position and weeping like a little boy. Lucky bastard, I thought. I would have killed to be sprayed with that aphrodisiac. Getting back up and dusting myself off, I again looked towards my pupil. I face faulted. He was on the ground moaning, with the chick moaning against him, while he had over 100 scantily clad girls rubbing against them. Moaning. I moaned. That is it. I thought viciously, brining my hands together. I did a series of dogs, boars, and horses. Lesser swamp technique. I hollered and slammed my hands onto the ground. The entire field instantly turned mushy and caused the girls to get stuck in the muck. I used chakra and stood on top of the swamp like water. Racing towards my student and plucked him out with a new girl attached to him. Crap, it's Tsunade's student. I started to sulk. I hate my kid. Naruto. You sleep with her, what else? I remember blacking out into a fading abyss. Slowly I traveled through the corridors in my mind. The sewers now had doors upon them. Testing 1. I gently opened it and looked through. That was me. And there was the old hag. Now she was dropped onto her knees, and reaching out with her hands to touch me. At least she's, oh my god. I instantly slammed the door shut, my face plastered red as I almost saw her. She was like a mother. I walked down the corridors again after catching my breath. Opening the door, I peeked inside. There was Ino, Hinata, Tenten, Tamari, Sakura. Who was that in the middle? That's me. I smiled cheekily, then all of the girls pounced on me. I watched for about 15 seconds more before I started to drip blood down my nose. I slammed the door to this one too. Okay, no more opening doors. I continued to trek down the catacombs, unaware of what was happening in the world outside. Jiraiya. Generic cuss word. I raced down the streets of Konoha trying to shake off the stampede of girls. I myself couldn't smell the odor that was making all these female and very aroused girls chase him. But hell, it was really powerful. I felt a shuriken zoom across my head with the words inscribed. Naruto loves me. I sweat dropped at the inscription and doubled my pace. Run. I pleated my legs to race faster, but to no avail. This was as fast as I could go while holding on to 2 people and making sure I don't lose them in my speed techniques. Think you fool. You are a Sanin. That's it. I yelled aloud at the last part. Tsunade. She's the answer to all of this hubbub. I grinned, finally an end to my pupil's fun. As I leapt straight into the Hokage tower, I rolled into a ball and reduced the impact and landed into a heap. Tsunade was there giving me the oddest look. I grinned cheekily at her until my eyes fell onto her chest. She had a big chest, she was a girl. Oh no. I prepared myself to rush Tsunade if worst came to worse. Oddly, nothing happened. She just sat there giving me a queer look. She wasn't attacking, so I checked the girl behind me. She wasn't doing anything except looking dazed and confused. Tsunade, come over here. I need you to check something for me. Still quirking her eyebrow at me, she got up and walked towards us. Whatever it is, Jiraiya, you better have a good explanation. Art of heal detection. I heard Tsunade murmur. As a blue liquid enveloped around my student, I saw Tsunade's eyes freak out as she straddled the boy. I always tried to get her to do that with me, but he gets it without trying and doesn't even notice. I face faulted, hard. What's the matter with you, Jiraiya? She asked haughtily. I looked hopeful. Her eyes were hazy, she slurred, she blushed deeply. I was going to score this time, no matter what. Her eyes were clear, she talked clearly, her face was a normal hue. Damn. She turned back to normal. What am I doing to my sun figure? She asked cautiously, as to ask herself what she wasn't supposed to be doing. Get off him, and we need to talk. I grabbed her hand and pulled her up to the nearest sofa. Seating ourselves, I went into the overly dramatic reenactment of what I thought had happened, until they reached my part. Then I exaggerated a few things, such as me taking on a horde of demons, missing nins, and wooing girls on the go to the Hokage tower. She didn't believe a single word of it, except the aphrodisiac part, because she herself had given the mission to her pupil. I think I know why it doesn't affect me. She started to trail. The incense in this room burns with a very powerful chakra. It was created during the Kyuubi siege to ward off demon spirits. I also suspect that these also nullify the effect of almost anything else. That's why this is the Hokage room. Let's take some Apachit around him, she informed Jiraiya. Both of them got up and went to a cupboard stored with the sacred incenses. Then walking over to the burning ones, they lit the new ones. Taking each one over to Naruto, then slowly they placed one strategically to mask the boy. By the time they had finished, Sakura had gathered her bearings and was back into a logical state of mind. What happened? So, not quite a logical state of mind. But it was close enough. You were chasing Naruto, Tsunade deadpanned. Was what? The pink-haired Kunoichi shirked loudly, her face was flared red. Why was I chasing Naruto? She started to inquire. Jiraiya tried to understand the medical jargon coming out of Tsunade's mouth, but to no avail. Sakura, however, was soaking it up like a sponge. So I see, hormonal spikes occurred in my body with a specific scent to the hydration of the molecules reacting violently to the chemicals of the aphrodisiac. Makes perfect sense now. I stared at both of them, they seemed so very in tune with whatever they were doing. Could somebody repeat that to me in English? I asked politely. It just means it makes a girl go into heat around Naruto, causing them to seek out the source, and to put out their flame, Tsunade said slowly, trying to not stumble over her own words. All of a sudden Ebisu crashed through the window and slammed into the door, causing a sort of super vacuum that not only blew out all the incense, but also swept the smoke and odor of the incense out the door. Quickly Sakura and Tsunade dropped their hormones to a level where they could still be stable. They seemed to try to get closer to Naruto, but for the most part they stayed sane. Or as sane as could be. Hokage-sama, there are a large number of women trooping towards the Hokage tower. Ebisu warned us of something he had made worse. I rushed towards the window and looked out. Oh, no, I whispered. Naruto. I continued to trek down the endless labyrinth of hallways and doors. I saw a bright light towards the end of it, and rushed towards it. Maybe this is it, I whispered to myself, I could finally get out of here. Only to jump into complete oblivion, as there was nothing but space and I was dropping extremely fast. I saw a spark at the bottom of the pit, so small but I caught it. Readjusting myself, I started to dive towards it. It was far away but I could see it. Tsunade. Damn it, Naruto, what have you gotten yourself into? I thought viciously. On one hand he was finally getting attention from the opposite, and the other hand it was all lust and artificial. I heard Jiraiya whisper something. Worriedly I went over to see what he was looking at. I quickly paled at the sight. It was not a mob. It was an organized army. An army of massive proportions. There were women in ranks and formations in siege formation surrounding the tower. Help! I felt the words echo in my ear as I whipped around only to brace myself. Sakura and Ebisu were both fending off Anko, Kurenai, and Yugo. I quickly joined the fray to help even the odds, but it seemed to do no good. Their want of Naruto was too great for us to subdue them without hurting them too greatly. Anko made a mad dive towards him. Jiraiya for the save swept him up, only to be kicked by Kurenai midair, grabbed by Ebisu before she could get it. Yugo snatched Naruto from Ebisu, and was making a rush. Only to be caught by Sakura by her leg, she tripped and fell as Naruto flew from her hands and out the window. Anko, Kurenai, and Yugo all jumped out, as the rest of us rushed towards the window to see the befallen fate of Naruto. He was falling into the hands of the lustful ones. Falling into the horde of women. Falling. The light grew nearer as he reached towards my destination, the light at the endless abyss. His eyes snapped open instantly as he saw himself quickly accelerating towards a large mass of women. Their eyes full of lust and hunger for meat, specifically the flesh of a young 15-year-old boy with golden blonde hair and sky-blue eyes. Which just so happened to be him. Instantly he put his hands into the familiar seal he used since my academy days. Forbidden technique. Art of the 1000 doppelgangers. He roared as he neared the wave. Instantly a huge smokescreen filled up the air and exactly 1,000 Narutos rained from the sky, much to the delight of the girls. Multiple Narutos. Oh, how much more fun could they think up? They just stood there for a second, drooling at their own perverted thoughts at the many ways to take advantage of poor Naruto-kun. Which was all he needed to escape. Half of his clones threw up the other half and those disappeared. Then half the ones in the air propelled the other half higher, repeating itself until there were only 2 left, already incredibly high up in the sky. After they used up their momentum, they instantly dissipated into a cloud of ninja smoke. In the air he twisted the angle of his body and headed straight across the sky in a flying line, moving so fast he was nearly a blur to the naked eye. Crashing into the earth and tumbling, he made a complete stop after rolling and gathering more friction with the earth. Getting up, he dusted himself off. There was only one person that could help him now. Trekking the road back into the village, he made his way towards the only one that could solve his problem. Kakashi. Pulling out my orange book, I made a quick glance around and saw that no girls, ladies, women, or personals of the female kind were around. Just my luck would have it, there were none. Nada, zip, none whatsoever as far as my eye could see. I was in pure ecstasy as I was able to read in total and complete freedom without someone looking at me in total disgust or distaste. I continued to walk down the stalls and read my fantastic 4th installment of Icha Paradise. Kagome is perverted when Kiyomaru is around. What a very naughty nurse. I giggled aloud at the scene that was beginning to get very sweaty and naked. Kakashi-sensei, I need your help. Quick, I heard a very familiar voice ring aloud. Sigh. Right when they were going to use the hospital food in very imaginative ways. On that note, my eyes grew into a happy curve. Stop being such a pervert, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto deadpanned, though Kakashi didn't look very apologetic. So what exactly need me to help you with? Kakashi questioned, though he didn't particularly care. It did intrigue him somewhat. Girl troubles, was his somewhat vague reply, but Kakashi got the idea. Well, you see, Naruto, when a girl likes you but you don't like her back, the best thing you should do is to get them to like someone else, so that you don't have to let them down. Naruto's usually dense features instantly brightened up. Thanks, Kakashi-sensei. Leaping on top of the building, he cupped his hands and yelled out as loud as possible. I'm here, ladies. Totally confusing Kakashi, he started to realize that the earth beneath him was vibrating violently. Naruto, leaping down behind Kakashi, explained his predicament in a nutshell. You left that very important detail out of our conversation a few minutes ago. Naruto rubbed the back of his head in a sheepish manner. Sorry, Kakashi-sensei. Well, good luck with stopping the girls. But I never. Then he realized he was talking to thin air because Naruto had taken off already. Turning around, he braced himself with his prized orange book. Tearing his eyes away from the page, he looked up to see this huge wave of bodies heading straight towards him. Thinking that he had to do a special technique, he readied himself to do his art of the doppelganger, but they all stopped in front of him. The glint in their eyes were eerily familiar with the ones he had received before. He traced their eyes towards their destination, which landed upon his hand. More specifically his limited edition book. Oh, no. This was the first time in a long time he was wrecked with fear. If they ripped up this book he'd never got another edition like it in his entire lifetime. They took a step forward, he took a step back. Another forward, another back. Turning around he made a mad break for it to get somewhere safer as the girls followed him attempting to maul him for having such a distasteful book. Get back here you pervert. Naruto. Phew, I hope sensei is alright. He thought about it for a second, and then thought against it. He was probably dead in some alley. Ah well, he shouldn't have been reading that perverted book like Ero Sennin. He quickly scanned the immediate area to check if anything was wrong. Then relaxed when I found that the girls were too busy being preoccupied. Psst, over here you stupid brat. Turning his head he found Jiraiya hiding in the bushes. Boy, listen to me. That aphrodisiac will last another 3 weeks and it's still day 1. I suggest you just let yourself get ravaged for the 3 weeks and then get on with your life. Okay? Naruto looked at Jiraiya. Jiraiya looked back. They looked at each other. No, why not? Because I have decency. Besides the obvious. Naruto sighed heavily. Okay, besides being in pure bliss for 3 weeks, do you have any alternatives that will get rid of my problems and still retain my dignity? Nope, you suck. You betcha. Turning his back on his sensei he was about to go but was stopped by a hand on his shoulder. Wait, I really hoped that during this whole crisis, or lack of if you just followed me instructions, that you would finally become just like me. But since you are so set on doing it the hard way, fine. Think about this logically, the aphrodisiac is causing the girls to go wild. Therefore you either neutralize the aphrodisiac or mask it. Masking it is out of the question because it's nearly impossible because it's potent enough to reach out to girls 500 feet away. So we need to find out how to neutralize the aphrodisiac. We can wash it off. No, we can't. Because it literally seeps into your skin and bones, so you can't get rid of it with normal means. You need a chemical that causes you to become distasteful. Sitting there they both tried to brainstorm of something. Though, Jiraiya was doing more of the thinking than Naruto. I've got it. You need an aphrodisiac. It's basically a libido stopper. So if we use it on you, it should negate the aphrodisiac enough to stop the girls from raping you. Though, I still think that's the way to go. That's a great idea. I mean the anaphrodisiac, not the girls. Jiraiya grimaced. Naruto, you aren't. You know, I'm not what? You know, gay? An awkward silence was passed between the two until a very girly scream rang out about 20 blocks from where Naruto left Kakashi. No, I'm not. I'm just not perverted. Now tell me where can I get an aphrodisiac? Honestly, I don't know. From what you've described to me and what I've seen, you have an S-class aphrodisiac on you so you need at least an A-class to negate most of that effects. Anything less than that will have absolutely no effect on you. But where do we get one? They both sat there in earnest, thinking of an answer until they both looked at each other at the same time and got the same idea. Kiba, the dog user, would surely be able to find the aphrodisiac seeing as how he had a sharp nose. But we need a sample of an aphrodisiac first. I just so happen to have one upon me. Why? In case beating the girls off with a stick wasn't enough. Ero Sennin, you know that would never happen. Why must you have so little faith in your teacher? Because you give me little reason to believe. Groaning, Jiraiya picked himself up and motioned for his student to get ready. As soon as Naruto looked ready, he set off leaping from one tree to the next in quick motions, occasionally glancing back to check on Naruto. Then a thought suddenly occurred to Naruto. Jiraiya, how do you know about Kiba? A mischievous smirk appeared on Jiraiya's lips. He's a big fan of my work, in fact he was in the line that you cut in front. I'm surrounded by perverts. Get used to it, kid. Yeah. Reaching in the gates they treaded carefully. Girls would burst out any second and ravage them. Specifically Naruto, but Jiraiya liked to think that they would take advantage of him as well. Sneaking past a group of women running by, they ducked into an alleyway. Where do you think the mud is? Probably in the hospital. Why the hospital? Because I beat him up earlier. Jiraiya didn't answer as a look of anger dawned on his face. You idiot, he roared at the top of his lungs and punching the blonde genin out of the alley right into the path of 3 groups colliding. Ino on the left, Ten on the right, and Hinata in the back. It was a dream turned into a nightmare. Damn it, Ero Sennin. He cried as he scaled the walls using chakra, but the girls were closing in. I'll do this myself. Grabbing the sample that Jiraiya had, he quickly leapt off the building and headed straight for the hospital, dodging and weaving through the girls. That is, until he saw a pissed-off-looking Kakashi standing in front of him. Ah, crap, Kiba. Ugh, I hate this thing. He moaned as he daintily poked the wrapping around his ear. Naruto's yell had caused him to go temporarily deaf in the ear. The doctors told him that it would naturally fix itself within a few days. But he would have to keep the dressing on it. He had various minor injuries on his body. Most were healed by the few male medic nins still available at the hospital. Kami, I will sacrifice a small cute furry animal to you every day to keep you company if you send Naruto into the room and let me kill him. Clasping his hands together he prayed. A window-shattering explosion occurred. As he looked over he saw a blonde package flying into the room and landing in a heap. Thank you. Whooping with joy he let loose a feral grin and jumped to attack Naruto. While Kiba was in the air, Naruto opened his eyes, only to see a dog boy hovering in the air heading straight for him. Ninja art. Body switch technique, as he replaced his body with the nearby mattress. Landing onto the springy furniture, Kiba instantly turned and leapt towards that way, only to jump right into Naruto's fist. What the hell was that for? Kiba screeched as he clutched his nose, checking to see if it broke. I need your help. Why should I help you? Kiba snarled back at Naruto. Taking Kiba by the shoulder, Naruto shoved him to the window. Curiously he peered outside to see a massive moaning blob, only to realize it was a huge orgy of girls coming straight at them. You want to be saved by that? Yes. Hey, Naruto, are you, what, gay? Letting loose a frustrated groan. What was wrong with not taking advantage of girls? Just sniff this, and find a stronger version of it. Hesitating briefly he took a small whiff. A glazed look appeared over his face, as he grabbed it and shoved it right up next to his nose. Heavenly, letting out a satisfied groan he contentedly smiled. Oh yeah, that's the good stuff. I'll definitely help you find more of this stuff. Perking his nose up he sniffed the air for traces. Nothing, we need to move somewhere that has more open spaces. Glancing back the girls he asked, are you sure you don't want to jump into that? Yeah, I'm sure. Whatever you say. They took off to the roof with the breeze drifting by. His nose perked up again. I got something, Naruto. Sniffing the sample again he raised his head and tried to trace any signs for a stronger sample. Then the strongest smell hit him. Oh man. Kiba let out a howl as he lost all control of his human senses and took off. Panicking Naruto took off after the dog boy to keep him safe from trouble. They ran past the buildings, outside the gates, and then to a caravan where he saw Kiba tear it open. Grabbing the contents of the box he opened it and sniffed it to his heart's content, eventually causing him to faint from overdose. Looking back he saw thousands of females screaming for him, huge banners waved of his name, his face, his body. He saw Jiraiya running towards him. This was a now or never moment. Swiping the box from Kiba's hands he took the vial out. This was it. He would finally be rid of this curse. Raising it to his lips he chugged the whole thing in one swig. Naruto, no. What? You're supposed to drink it. He looked down to his hands and started to see copies and images. He grew tired and his eyes dropped down. The last thing he saw were the girls hesitating towards coming him for the last few seconds. It's finally over. Closing his eyes he fell onto the ground peacefully. Sometime later, his eyes flickered open as he took in his surroundings. He wasn't in a building like he thought he would be. He was outside, in the same spot he had fallen down, who knows how long ago. He moved his hands around his body to find a shred of clothing but failed. He was completely naked, but whatever he was laying on was really soft. Turning his head he blushed and turned back up. Sitting up he looked around, and the forest was littered with naked girls. I guess it didn't work. Lying his head back down on the softness he just closed his eyes. Epilogue. Groaning he opened his eyes only to be flared with white lights. The fluorescent glaring into his eyes and burned him. Immediately he shut his eyes. Guess you're awake. Glancing over he saw Sakura, Tsunade, and Shizune. To his right Jiraiya and Kiba stood there, a grin on their faces. It's over, so don't you worry now. Smiling he nodded and contently fell back into slumber. In the morning he awoke, being told that he could leave. He did so. Walking out with a large grin on his face he saw a group of boys messing around. One of them was flipping a vial up and down in his hand. Paranoia was ridden upon him, but he shrugged it off. He walked by as the group of boys went by. "I'm gonna get lucky tonight with this baby," one of the teenagers said. Naruto accidentally caught him on the shoulder as he was finally crossing by. "Oh no, my Aphrodisiac." The young man cried. Naruto's face turned pale. "Aphrodisiac?" the blonde asked hesitantly. An awkward nod occurred, as Naruto felt a vial shatter upon his head, and liquid seep down all over his face. "No,